Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Osama Dorias. I'm a Senior Partner Relations Manager at Unity, and I'm here. I have the honor of being here with Daniel Mullins of Daniel Mullins Games. And this, what is this? Is it a terrarium? It's not an aquarium. There's no water.
Yeah.
In this booth. I'm super happy to be here. How are you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing great. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, so remember on Wednesday when a few things happened?
It was somewhat memorable.
It was somewhat memorable. Yeah, you walked home with
a box.
not one, not two,
Yeah.
not even three, but 4 awards during the award ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the honor of handing you one of those, and I felt how heavy they were. Did you need help to take them home?
I did take an Uber home instead of carrying it the many blocks. I think that would have been a lot.
I think so. You could have asked me for help. I would have helped you.
Yeah.
So before we get started, just in case, want to be clear with everybody, if you haven't played this game, Inscryption, we are probably going to spoil the game a lot, right? Based on my questions, based on the questions from the Twitch channel. So if you don't want to be spoiled, maybe go play the game first. It's, literally an award-winning game, one of the most award-winning games ever. Go play it first, and then maybe watch us later when on the recording. You've been warned.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
The first question is, what came first for your game, the story or the gameplay?
Yeah, so I think the short answer would be I think there was more of a gameplay basis there first, but I should say that both of those things would evolve together over the course of it. So it wasn't like I had a whole game and then a story was put on or the other way around. But it did start as a game jam entry, and that game jam entry had a little bit of story, but it was mostly like focused on the card game mechanic and the cutting off of your hand and eye mechanics.
Oh my god.
But I don't know if those count as like story things, more just like things that you do in the game. So I'd say, yeah, like the gameplay was there first, and then they both evolved together.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Since we jumped right into it, how about we talk about the game a little bit? Because you mentioned there's a card element. You mentioned that there's some really heated moments. So I guess the escape room element came later.
A little bit later.
Yeah.
It was fairly early though.
Okay.
The thing it was about 3 years of development, and that was in there in the first 6 months, I'd say. Just so it came pretty early on.
At what point while you were working on the Game Jam game did you realize that you had a winner and this is a game that you wanted to continue forward with?
Well, I guess it wasn't during, when I was working on the Game Jam game over just a weekend. I didn't have much time to think about anything other than finishing it. And then I think it was after the Game Jam came out and it got second place in Ludum Dare, and I had some YouTubers pick it up, which was really cool because normally people don't pay that much attention to Game Jam games. They're pretty small and simple. And so when I got that kind of attention, that was when I felt that I had something pretty good.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And when did you decide to have another act, and maybe even another act after that?
Yeah, that was about a year in.
Wow.
I was really focused on the part 1 of the game that you see in the trailers and stuff, and making that really solid. But I knew I wanted some kind of twist or some way to take things to the next level. So I think about 1 year in, I had this sort of vision for how the rest of it could play out after
Excellent.
that. Yeah.
And during this time, how many, did the story change during development? Did you have anything else that you wanted to tell, or another direction that it was going to go before you decided, no, I'm going to bring it back, this is how it is?
Yeah, it changed a lot. A little known kind of idea for the game early on that I thought maybe one direction it could go was that there were going to be 3 smaller games in this collection I was going to do as my next big project, and one of them was going to be this game. And I thought that maybe there'd be this twist where you collect items over the course of your card game run, but some of the items would seemingly be useless in the card game, like a flashlight or a pair of shoes or something. And then at some point you'd have to escape the cabin on foot with the bad guy Leshy chasing after you, and that's when you'd have to use those escape items that you'd been collecting for your final run. So that was an early idea that got scrapped at some point, but I guess that would count as a different direction.
Somewhere out there in the multiverse, there's a version of the game where you're running away from the cabin with a flashlight.
And
awesome.
sneakers,
Love to hear it. Okay, so the other question I had for you is, what would you change if you were given the chance right now?
Yeah, I guess there's just certain things that like weren't as good as they could have been. All throughout the game, I guess. There's certain difficulty-related things in Part 1 that are not as good as I hoped, where people sometimes have a bad experience. I think especially people who are really good at card games come in and they whip through Part 1 really fast and they don't get to experience it all, and then they have the rug pulled out from under them with this Part 2, and they're not ready for that change yet, and those are the people who complain and give it a bad review, and I understand that. So I think more time could have been spent trying to find ways to make it a good experience for people on the extremes of the card game skill spectrum.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't really foreshadow Part 2. Like
No.
You have to live the surprise. That's a hard challenge to.
But I guess I would have them like somehow be stuck in Part 1 for longer. Like
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so I'd like to ask you about the side characters. Like, what can you tell us about them? Any details that you'd like to share? Because I know from experience working on different games, is a lot of time that we developers, we have time to spend with the main characters. But whenever production, there are production needs and we need to make cuts, they often come at the expense of the side characters. Like, they're the stories that we take shortcuts in or cut things out. So I'm always curious to see what other elaborations. Were there other characters that didn't make the cut? Were there anything like that you could tell us? Any histories of the characters that aren't very apparent or people didn't catch on?
Yeah. The side characters in Inscryption, and I think in my other games too, are kind of funny and a little stupid. Like I kind of end up like doodling something, and then as I'm like drawing it, I have an idea for their personality, but they're usually very one-dimensional and simple. But I guess one that people don't talk about too much that's kind of weird is in Part 2 in the factory, there's a weird robot that like seems to have something like trapped inside of it, the smelter, and it's the character that doesn't appear very much, but like I think the idea was that there's a robot, and then inside that robot there's a meat bot, which is one of the cards, which is like a human head with like robot legs. And I think that there's a meat bot like trapped inside of the smelter that's trying to get free.
Oh my
god,
god,
very horrifying.
It is horrifying
to live within a robot that's trying to imprison you.
Do you have any clues there for people to pick up on that?
The dialogue is really weird. Like when the smelter talks, there's some dialogue, and then another box will appear really quickly that's like, help me, and then it goes away. And then and then people don't talk about that, maybe because it's just very unclear what's going on there.
Yeah, well, at the same time, there's a lot of similar things happening all over the game.
Yeah.
So this is like par for the course, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so what would you have done differently there to maybe foreshadow it more or make it more clear? Or are you happy with how it is?
I'm kind of happy with it. I kind of like these characters that leave. They really are when I put them in, they're simple, and I'm not really giving you much to go off, but I've found that players have invented their own ideas of who the characters are, and I kind of think that's a lot of fun. Like they, especially some of the more well-liked characters that are very simple, like the wizard with her head on a spike.
Yes.
I don't know much about her as a writer because it was a sort of one-dimensional character, because she was like a student in the wizard school, and she was being tortured. They all had their own ways of being tortured by this terrible wizard professor, and her torture was being stuck on a spike. But then people invent why she's there and what her personality is, and I just think that's neat. I'd rather let them do that, actually.
That's great. That's actually a really interesting way to approach it. So do you ever, like, I know there's no, you don't really have any way to talk back to the players and say, hey, this is what it is now, right? But in your mind, you kind of say, well, I had this in mind, but this, like, this theory is so good, this is the truth now. Do you ever do that?
I do often find that people's theories are better than what I came up with, but I've learned to try not to confirm or deny those, because it can lead to contradictions, because then later be like, you said it was this, and maybe I forgot some detail and I'm contradicting myself. So it's better to just say, I like your interpretation. That's cool, but I don't want to comment on if it's true.
That makes perfect sense. I actually worked on. I was a narrative designer briefly when I worked at Gameloft, and I worked on a game called Dungeon Hunter. It was a series. So I worked on 3. I wasn't on 1 or 2. I worked on 3. Then I worked on 4. And on 4, we had a character who, like you said, was one-dimensional. He was there like as a quest giver. We didn't really flesh him out too much.
Yeah.
And in 5, we had another character kind of similar to him because we based him on a similar model,
Right.
but we changed up a few things.
And people made a connection.
And people made a connection, and they had this lore
I love
around
that,
it.
yeah.
So when we eventually added content to the game, we leaned into it. We
Yeah.
gave even more clues and more. It became what our intention was, even though that wasn't the original intention.
Yeah.
And that unlocked something for me where I'm like, I'm gonna go dig through more of these and see if I could, like, take the theories and have them inspire more of the characters.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in that.
Oh,
right?
definitely. Yeah, that's a good trick that I don't think players often think about. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, it's okay.
Hearing voices.
Yeah.
But I think it's a powerful trick to pretend like you intended something, and then players think it's magical and you're a mastermind, but really you're kind of riffing on what other people are doing.
Exactly. And other times people don't pick up on it on a thread, and you're like, oh, maybe we'll abandon this thread. We thought of something better later on.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's interesting about that is the players never know about these things. There actually almost nobody ever knows. Like, it's very rare that we talk about these things as developers.
Yeah.
So it would be. Maybe this is an idea for a series or a book or something where we just collect all these stories of the stories.
I would read that for sure.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's crowdsourcing, but kind of not intentional until it is. That's great. Okay, so actually that brings us to our next question. Are there any secrets or anything that you had in the game? You kind of half answered that with the side characters or the meat bot inside the not meat bot. Is there anything else that people just didn't pick up on?
Well, yeah, at this point, this game is unusual in the fact that people really picked it over. Because I had the ARG and I was intentionally hiding clues in there, they have really, really picked it over. Like every file, and they're looking for clues. They really want there to be more clues for another ARG or some big secret. And I think maybe with my next game, I would aim to... It would be really cool to have a secret that was only discovered months later.
Yeah.
It would have to be very, very hard to find. I would have to think about how to do that because these people are good at finding.
Yeah. They're really good.
Yeah. So, but maybe I'll make... So yeah, the short answer is I'm quite sure everything has been found, but maybe for the next game I'll take it on as a challenge to have something that gets discovered like 6 months later.
That makes perfect sense. All right, what else do we have here? Let me just take a quick look. There are some messages I think I've been missing. All right, so this is a question we have for one of the users.
Cool.
Do you get rewards for hitless boss fights?
Like in the game, if you don't take any damage from the boss?
Yeah.
No. There's I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any way that you could see it that way, but I don't think so, no.
Okay, that was an interesting question. Okay, came out of nowhere. Okay. So let's talk about some of your favorite recent games that have come up.
Yeah. Well, I'm not just saying it because they were going to be on the panel, but Unpacking was was up there. I mean, as far as narrative games, I was, it was very enjoyable activity, and they of course know that. Like, it was very satisfying to just place the things, of course, and I think it was important that they had that. But also, like, I appreciate the unconventional storytelling aspect of it, which is why they were going to be on this panel. The few subtle moments I think were really cool. I think the one that really like pulled the rug out from under me was when I had finished unpacking the entire house after the breakup, and then they told me I wasn't allowed to keep the boyfriend's picture up.
Yes.
And because up until that point, that mechanic was only ever used to tell you can't put your toothbrush in your bedroom and stuff, like practical things. Yeah, exactly. But then this was the first time it was like, no, this is for an emotional reason that you can't do this. And I thought that was a really cool moment.
I really did think that was beautiful. And for like leading up to that, just the fact that you weren't able to put your diploma anywhere of value in that same room, that was
I think I missed that one. Maybe I should replay it. Yeah, but there's probably more of those that I missed. I think I don't know what I did with my diploma.
Oh, I mean, okay, I'm going to take a little moment to plug another thing that I do, but I'm also the co-host of the Habibi's podcast.
Oh, yeah, I've heard.
With Rabbi Ismail.
Yeah.
And we are really good at predicting who are going to win an award.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so you were on our list, of course, and so was Unpacking. And I'm super happy to see that you were, showered with praise and all these accolades. But yeah, so the way we do that segment is that we each come with our top 10 list, and we compare it to see how many times it comes up, a different game come up. So Inscryption and Unpacking were on all 3 of our lists.
Yeah. Good radar.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we can call them, but also you made it really easy for us.
Oh, thanks.
Let's see if we got anything else from. I don't want to be looking at the Twitch the whole time we're talking, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm getting as many questions as possible. Don't want to ignore everyone. One moment here. We'll take a breather. Okay. So I heard Inscryption. Oh, that disappeared for a sec. 1 second. I'll get the question back. I heard Inscryption was often referred to as horror, but Daniel said it wasn't exactly what he was aiming for.
Yeah.
Has he even considered making an actual horror game, considering these are so popular these days?
Yeah, I think the person who asked the question is kind of right, because I mean, I'm not gonna deny that it's scary or something, and I know that it says horror on Steam. I think it is somewhat accurate, but I just feel that I'm not really going out of my way to try and scare you. I know it's unsettling, and one of my friends told me that he had actual nightmares from the game, so I know it can be scary. Yes. It's hard for me to see it that way, obviously, after staring at it for 3 years. But as for would I make an actual horror game, I think that'd be really fun. Yeah, I think so. I would love to try that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have to confess, when I played, every single time I had to pull out my eyeball, I had to look away. Yeah. So I'm just kind of align all the things, look away, and press the button and hope for the best. Not the first time, because I didn't really believe it was going to happen. Yeah. But each time after that. All right, let's see. We have another one. When in the process did you decide to go for the big pixelated effect that is so Inscryption? So I guess the rendering style.
Right. Yeah. Very early. Yeah, that was one of the first few things. I really liked the pixelation or downscaling effect. I've seen it. I think a few examples that I really liked. One, A Short Hike. I really liked how that game looked. That was probably cemented in my mind as something that I wanted to emulate at some point. Celeste was another inspiration in that regard. I know it's more of a traditional looking pixel art game, but they have some cool stuff the character's hair is procedural and sticks to the pixel grid, and a lot of cool effects that look great because it's stuck in that pixel grid. So yeah, it was something I wanted to do early on, and I stuck to it.
So early on, not Game Jam, after the Game Jam.
Yeah, after the Game Jam. Yeah, I'm trying to think actually. The Game Jam, I think it actually did do that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, you leaned into it hard. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So okay, I had a really cool moment in the game when I realized that I could actually make a card of me.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite, because I mean, I'm a game designer.
Yeah.
I play a lot of card games, but I also make card games for fun. And that moment that it hit me where I'm like, what? I could combine all these things to make a card, and those are always the most broken best cards. Oh, not always. Sometimes you just get unlucky, but usually they're the most broken best cards.
Yeah.
The thing is, I mean, obviously this is how the game is set up. It took me a while before I realized that my cards from previous runs were added to the new one.
Yeah.
So I had 7 cards named Osama. Before I'm
Osama 1, Osama.
Yeah, they were just Osama. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Before I realized, hey, I could, branch out a bit and, create new creations and name them not just my name, but...
Funny. Well, to be fair, the character does say, tell me your name.
Yes, so
It's
exactly.
a little confusing.
Exactly. It took a while before I'm like, okay, you know what? Because then it becomes clear how the loop works and that you're not the same person.
Yeah.
Because at some point I'm like, I was questioning it. I'm like, are you the same person coming back? Are you not? And I mean, it's clear when it's clear.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, it leaves some doubt.
No, I agree. I mean, I had some doubt making it. I wasn't sure about that either. As I was writing it, I was like, okay, wait, what is going on here? Because there's a person in the fiction playing the game, and then there's the player character, and it was confusing even for me. So I'm sure that there's one dialogue line that doesn't make sense because I mixed it up or something.
That always happens. But I mean, whatever. People will find another excuse for it and fill in the lore for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so who is your favorite Inscryption character?
I don't know. I mean, gotta be Goobert.
Why?
Just
not gonna get away with just mentioning it.
I think just the joke of it all. Basically, I mentioned before there's like a sort of evil wizard professor who tortures his students, and one of them, the punishment is to be turned into goo. And I thought that was just silly. And then for a while, Goobert existed just as that pixel art sprite, and I was working in this office with one other person who is my friend, and he does 3D modeling, and I said, could you make a 3D goo man? And I was like, just send him the sprite. Could you just make a goo man? He's like, yeah, I'll make a goo man. And then it just was born. And then I loved it. I loved his goo man so much that I was like, I need to, as much as possible, make this character the star of the game. And I kind of knew from the beginning it had some good like sort of mascot character potential. And then when people embraced the goo man, and then they gave it a name, like the people on my Discord called him Goobert, and then that stuck, and I just loved that. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I want to take it back actually to another comment you made earlier when you said that these were supposed to be, or not supposed to be, but you had the intention of making them 3 separate games.
Yeah.
The progression was still shared between them, right?
Well, not really. They were going to be, I think it was going to be you could play them in whatever order. They were going to be like really distinct. Like, one of them might even be like a multiplayer game. And they might have had one thing in common, which was sort of like the story of like digging up the floppy disk. I was actually thinking of that originally, where like I had this idea of like someone like unearths this like crate full of floppy disks, and these are like some of the things that were on it, and like no one knows where it came from. Yeah. And so that idea was early on, then it was like forgotten, and then it was like brought back later. And so the only thing to wrap it up, what I'm saying, the only thing that was going to be in common about those 3 games is that they were like in this fiction that they were found in a mysterious box, kind of.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I really like where it landed, where actually one leads to the other, and there's an overarching story.
Yeah, I think it probably is better than that other idea of having 3 different things. That would have been fun to do, but
I don't know if you play Magic the Gathering at all.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you know, on the back of the Magic card, the reason it says Deckmaster is because they had the plan to make 3 separate games.
You know what? It's a piece of Magic trivia I didn't know.
Yeah. They actually were going to make 3 separate games that you could combine and play together, but they're supposed to have somewhat different rules. That's why it says Magic the Gathering.
The Gathering.
Yeah, and then I think it's Deckmaster or something like that.
Yeah. And so was the other one's going to be like Magic : something else?
Something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was always the strangest name for
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. It didn't make sense. I'm like, why is it? So there were supposed to be 3 Magic games, and they're all part of the Deckmaster box or what have you. And then it became so wildly popular, they're like, okay, maybe we won't stop at 3.
Yeah.
And now they were stuck with the card back.
Yeah.
Because of course every card has to have
if
the
you
exact
change
same.
it, then you can't
play together.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how like sometimes you have to pivot.
Yeah.
At some point, and the end result is often better. Like
in
this case, of course.
Yeah. It was nice to bring ideas back from earlier on and like stick them into the final game. I kind of like the idea of like recycling like that, or like being like efficient about things. You know, if you have a good idea lying around, you might as well like try to use it somehow.
Absolutely. So we have a question by Smirking Ravens. By the way, a lot of the questions we had before, I wasn't calling out who was asking them.
Okay.
It was Smirking Ravens.
Okay.
Who's your favorite scribe? And he wrote scribe with 3 Y's in the middle. You have to call that out.
Probably PO3, not because the character is the most likable. Obviously, the character is quite obnoxious and perhaps evil. But as far as writing that character, I had the most fun because it was a character where I was most drawing from personal experience of playing sometimes obnoxious people in Magic. Where there's a certain type of personality, like a bit like I don't know if you've seen that episode of Adventure Time where they're playing that card game.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, there's an episode of Adventure Time called Card Wars, and the character Jake the dog is like being a totally obnoxious card game player, and they nailed that trope so well. And so I was kind of going off a similar type of character there.
Okay, so you just mentioned Magic the Gathering and Adventure Time.
Yeah.
Were there other references that you would call out as big inspirations for Inscryption?
I mean, definitely Hearthstone is like kind of, I think, foundational for digital card games.
Yes.
Like there's a before and after, especially maybe not so much in the mechanics, but like how they look and feel. Like I don't remember anything before Hearthstone that like the card like slams into the opponent and like dust flies everywhere, and it's like satisfying, and every card has a voice line, and like they really upped the ante there. Absolutely. And I think everything after has been trying to meet that new standard. And
every card game before Hearthstone I felt was what if we took the real, the card game and put it in digital? Hearthstone was like, what if we used the advantages that we would have by just making a thing digital, and do things that are not possible otherwise in the real? I think that's the brilliance.
Exactly. I think you're exactly right. Yeah. So I think everything like comes from every digital card game should in some way credit Hearthstone. But then I think there's a reference to Yu-Gi-Oh, a pretty obvious reference to Yu-Gi-Oh near the end of Inscryption, and I think those are the most like outright inspirations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other card games that you play?
Not like frequently. I think Magic's the only one that's stayed with me over the years. Recently, I was playing a card/board game called Wingspan quite a bit.
Yes, the birds.
Yeah. Really beautiful, nice game, and quite deep. Like it's not something that you can figure out.
Yeah.
It's like you can play it many times and still find new interesting things in there.
It's a very approachable, casual look. But it's actually the depth is surprising.
Yeah.
Maybe because of the approachable, casual look. Yeah.
And I love how every single card is different. Like every card, they repeat some of the mechanics, but there's like hundreds of cards they give you in that box, and each one is a unique bird.
That makes sense. Yeah. What about any digital games that you played other than Hearthstone as references?
Yeah, I'm trying. Oh, well, of course, I should say Slay the Spire.
Yes.
As far as the deck building roguelike side of things.
Yes.
So definitely that. I think this is. I enjoyed Monster Train, although of course that's quite derivative of Slay the Spire, but it definitely has interesting ideas, and it definitely stands on its own.
Yeah.
I think those two come to mind. Yeah.
I have an embarrassing amount of hours in Slay the Spire across 4 different platforms.
Oh yeah, you got it on everyone.
It is my unwind game. It replaced several other unwind games. It's it's super. I'm totally into it, but I play the dailies every day. Well, nice. I mean, it's GDC time, so I'm not playing it this week, but I play.
You got it right there, boot it up.
Yeah. If this was my laptop, that would be the truth. This is not. But yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorite games of all time. It is such a well-constructed, balanced game. I'm really impressed with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy that was a reference. And I could see. I mean, the inspiration.
I definitely, that was how I knew that part 1 was going to work, because someone had already kind of done that structure. I was basically lifting their basic skeleton and then filling it out differently, I guess.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we have another question by Smirking Ravens. They say, I know Daniel worked with some other people on Inscryption. Were they people we worked with that you worked with before? If not, how did you get to meet them? I think this person wants to be on your team, so they want to position themselves. However.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I don't work with too many other people, but the only one person who has been a collaborator across all my games is Jonah Senzel, who does the music and sound. Aside from him, everyone was new. It was really mostly just 3D artists that I worked with, and I found them online by just looking at portfolios and finding people on Twitter. I would kind of make a spreadsheet. Oh, these people all look good. I would send them all an email, and then I would see who was available and interested.
There you go. Yeah. So there is no secret to it.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else we have. Was Danny worried about how players... Oh, he wrote Danny. I think he means Daniel. No, I don't see it.
I don't mind. Yeah.
To react to the second act of the game when the art style completely changes to 2D pixel art. Were you worried about that?
Not that much. I was worried when the game came out. The day it came out, there were a few vocal people who were really mad about that, and I think that was when I was most worried.
Wow.
Just they felt there's a very, very small minority Inscryption players who feel that it's a scam, and because it's not in the trailer that it's false marketing and stuff. Not sure if I'm fully agree with them, but I guess they're right. They're it's fair to be upset about something.
I mean, just take a picture of your 4 awards and say, here, this is... You can't argue with awards.
The good thing is now that there's this expansion, Casey's Mod, which makes it more like Slay the Spire, something you can keep playing. So now you can't complain because you have that if you want it.
Oh my God. I am going to lose my social life completely as soon as this comes out.
It would be nice to do daily runs. I was thinking about that. You saying that you play them all the time.
I play them all the time. I love the modifiers. I'll play them whether they're unfair and brutal or whether I'm overpowered. Either way, they feel good.
Yeah.
And that's... a thing that's hard for me to explain, because in some situations I'm like, that's totally unfair. But if I reach the end, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
And other times I'm like, I'm breezing through it. But that feeling of being overpowered, because I think it's because of the cadence, because of they go back and forth between one or the other, that just the surprise, what is it going to be this time? That feels good. But I mean, in general, my personality is I like randomness in games. Like if I play a game like Overwatch, I'll play the Mystery Heroes mode, and I'm just like, surprise me, which character do you want? Surprise me. I like random on fighting games, so I think that that player type really loves the daily challenges for that, and people who like actual to have a challenge to compete with other people for high scores. I don't look at the leaderboard. I don't care how other people did. I just like seeing the different configuration of things. I think it's part of being a system designer. You just like to see how things come together and how the gameplay is different.
And it must be a good system if like the dailies keep being interesting. Like there's enough different random modifiers to make them fresh every time. That's cool.
Absolutely. Are you able to talk about when that's going to come out? Or
it actually is out.
Wait, what? When?
Well, you're not too far off, because it was only just last week.
Since I had to prep for the awards, and I'm like, the last week doesn't exist for me.
No worries,
I was in a
I'm
void.
Sure you had a lot going on.
I had a lot going on, but I'm super happy because now I have something waiting for me at home. You know, it's my birthday on Sunday.
Oh,
so thank you for this birthday present. You heard it here, folks. That was for me. You all get to play
all
it.
For you.
See there. I'm gonna quote you on that. Awesome. Okay, so what else can we talk about here? Let's take a look if we have any other questions. All right. Okay, so I'm curious about those other 3 games, like the separate ones. You mentioned a few. Were there any other directions? Did you ever think of, like, was one of them possibly going to be a fighting game or a racing game or something really out of whack? You mentioned multiplayer. So what was it, if you could talk more about it?
I mean, I had an idea of a game that was, and when I say multiplayer, it wasn't like, not like a team-based brawler or something. I had an idea of sort of a side-scrolling adventure that used some of those online Dark Souls features, like leaving messages for people or like seeing other people's deaths and stuff. I just had a few ideas in that realm of things of trying to take. I really like those types of Dark Souls mechanics, and I had some ideas on how to riff on them and do them in a different way. So that was going to be one of them. It didn't get very far on that one. And then the other one, I was thinking it might be like in the universe of my last game, The Hex, and because there's like a core group of people who really liked that game. It wasn't as big as my other 2, but I wanted to do something for them. And The Hex has like 6 different game genres in one, and I was thinking it'd be cool to do like an additional chapter, just one more, or maybe 2, and maybe it would be The Hex, but like one of them is like a MOBA, and like the MOBA character is like trying to get out or something, you know. That one didn't get very far either. I was really like, let's start with the card game, because it's already, there's already something here. And then it kind of just kept
something
going.
Really good. Like, it's an excellent card game on its own. If you released just a card game, this would have been an excellent game on its own. So you just like really, it's incredible what you're able to accomplish. All right, so let's see. We have another question here. Are you able to talk about your narrative process? Would you like to talk about, like, do you write stories outside of games? Do you write short stories? Like, is this something that you're interested in or have been in the past?
I have to say the narrative process, I think, is very much tied into games. I don't think I've ever really written anything like a story or anything like that. I guess when I was a bit younger, I did some films as a hobby, so I guess I could relate to telling a story that way a bit more. But the process seems to be really tied into the development of the game. Like, it's like ideas for the story come out of the mechanics, and ideas for the mechanics come out of the story, and it's all kind of like mushed together. And I really don't think that the story of Inscryption, if you could even call it that, is like something that really works as a novel. Like, if it was written out, it would not be that great.
No.
You have to live it.
You absolutely have to live it.
So I think for that reason, it's a game story, and so it comes along with the game as it goes.
Well, not everyone can, even writers, not everyone can write the same kind of fiction. Some people excel in interactive, some people don't. I know, because many times when I've worked on projects in the past, we've hired writers who never wrote for games, and it was kind of tricky to explain to them in some situations what's easy for us, what's hard for us, what's interesting. A lot of times when writers come from different mediums, they lean to write really linear things because that's just just what other mediums are.
Yeah.
But there's also like production constraints. Like a lot of times they write a lot of exposition and a lot of dialogue. And for us, that's voice acting money. It's more expensive. Or for us, it's cheaper to have like an airplane crash because we can reproduce that 10 times.
Yeah,
If you already have the VFX and the helicopter or whatever already modeled.
Yeah.
It's not. And it's interesting working with writers who've never worked in our medium to explain to them what's cheap, what's expensive, what they could reuse, what's not reusable, and just like what's interesting in terms of story when it's open-ended and when you allow for branching, what's possible, but how you have to not always keep it branching because we don't have infinite budget to let it do that. So it's really interesting that you delved like right into games directly, not through another path.
I guess I have the advantage of doing some of that production stuff. So when I'm writing it, then I have those constraints very much in my mind. And I'm sure like the more veteran video game writers have a really good sense of they may not be programmers, but they probably know what that's like and what's possible and stuff. And that probably helps them a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of speaking on that topic, it overlaps a little bit with what we talked about before in terms of your inspiration. But the question we have from, I think it's Pedro Silva is what it looks like, but written with numbers. How do you come up with your ideas? Where do you seek inspiration? So I guess you've already mentioned some games. Outside of games, maybe.
Yeah, I think I get ideas from films, and I think sometimes ideas come up from the creation. I think I was saying with some of the side characters, like as you're drawing it, if it's like a little pixel art portrait, maybe you draw the mouth weird and then you realize the character has a smirk and then you're like, okay, let's roll with that. Maybe it's a smug character, and then you kind of so I think sometimes the ideas just emerge in the act of making sometimes.
Chaos.
Yeah. And then other games. I mean, I think other games would probably be the biggest answer. Like you can see Slay the Spire here, you can see Magic. That's where like the mechanical ideas are coming from. And I think really as far as mechanics go in Inscryption, I'm really just like grabbing the best of what I know and shoving it together.
Yeah, I mean, not literally, you have like multiple card games designed, like multiple mechanics, different energy systems, different ways to use cards.
But they're all just grabbed from other, like there's not that. And
even the sacrifice one, I thought that was unique.
Well, it's a bit like Yu-Gi-Oh. It's a bit like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Well, that's my blind spot.
I've never played a Yu-Gi-Oh. I haven't played that much Yu-Gi-Oh either, but I knew about that. Yeah, and I think there's not that many things in Inscryption that are totally unique. They're just like little bits and bobs thrown together. Yeah,
nothing's really unique.
Yeah.
Everyone borrows from everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, so where did Daniel find the actor for the in-betweens? That person.
Well, a little bit like I was saying with the 3D artist, just going online and trying to find someone. For the actor, unlike 3D artists, it couldn't really be remote, because I needed to shoot them in person. So I was only looking in Vancouver. And I just went on a Vancouver actors Facebook group and I made an ad and I said, I'm looking for someone for this game. Or I was looking for 2 actors. And then I got some people who did auditions and I tried to pick the best one. And that's,
pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
How else are you going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Unless you lucked on someone, like someone introduced you or something like that. It's going to be put up a job posting. And the job posting was pretty clear about who you are and what the game was going to be. It wasn't like a secret Kojima thing.
No, it wasn't too secret, but I don't think many people in that Facebook group were like big gamers, so I don't think they knew. They probably wouldn't have ever heard of my other games, and so they were just like, oh, it's a video game? Like, that's weird, but
Well, I'll do it, I guess.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so this is a question about when the physical version of Inscryption is coming. People are saying they need that as merch. Need is really emphasized.
Yeah, I've been asked that before. There's no like box set that will let you play all of Inscryption or something with like 100 cards, but we are working on something that's like a small collection of a few very nicely made like cards as merch, and there's like really detailed custom art for some of the cards in the game, and it's still being worked on, so I can't say when that.
Of course.
Yeah.
I saw some fans take it up on themselves to
make their own those versions. Are really cool.
They were really awesome. Good, because my follow-up question was, how do you feel about that? And obviously you really like it.
I think it's great. Yeah, I'd love to see that stuff.
Big fan of fan art as well. Okay, what do we have here? So Pedro Silva's back, or if your name is really numbers, I apologize. Do you keep a journal or other types of documentation? Can you talk a bit about how you stay organized and motivated?
Yeah.
So those are two separate questions. So let's start with organized and then move on to the motivated.
Yeah, I used to kind of have like Google Docs and a Trello board, like just for like little ticket items. And recently I moved to an app called Notion, which is a web app that like it kind of combines all those things in one place. So I have in my Notion for Inscryption, there's like a few. One of them is like all the bugs, and when it's done, I move it to a different column and so on. One of them is like just full of ideas, and then some of them are just like documents where maybe I had to at one point like plan a little bit ahead with the story and write some things down. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a messy like box full of like file folders with like paper falling out. It's not very like that organized, but at least it's all in one place. So.
And at least you're not gonna forget it or lose it on a napkin or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
How many people are in your Notion, if you don't mind me sharing that?
Just me, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think maybe I would invite someone to like look at one of the documents if it involved, like for my sound person, like here's the sound one, but not really anyone who else can like pour through all of it. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to, actually, if you could answer the second question, and we'll wrap up after that. So what about motivation? How do you stay motivated? Making games is hard, and sometimes you're looking at the same thing over and over, and you just want it to be done.
Yeah.
How do you force yourself to keep going?
Well, I think I have two answers there. One of them is that it's a lot easier when people give you awards and people online give you good reviews and stuff. Like seriously, like you can't underestimate having positive reinforcement like that is so important. So I appreciate all that. And but the other thing I guess I would say is that I try to make the development exciting by always doing something new within the game. Like that's probably why there's that part 2 and the part 3, because it keeps me interested. If I was only looking at that part 1 the whole time for 3 years, I would probably start to get a little sick of it too.
Wow, that's a good like trick to give people.
Yeah, I think you have to think about like you want to make a great experience for other people, but you won't do that if you're not enjoying it and excited about it. So I think if you make yourself excited about what you're working on, then it will come out better for it. So
100%. All right, wise words.
Yeah.
So honestly, Daniel, I absolutely enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to talking to you again. Hopefully, one day I'll hand you another award. I know you're going to get them. I'm just saying, hopefully, I'm the one who's handing them to you. Thank you so much for coming on. If you have any closing remarks or anything else you wanted to say before we move on?
No, just thanks for hosting and
Awesome.
I wish the other people could have been here, but
I wish.
Yeah.
That would have been a different conversation, but this was a great one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Yeah.
And up next we have a creator spotlight with Neon White featuring Ben Esposito. Thank you.
Thanks.